A lone lantern flickered inside the barn, casting long shadows across the dusty floor. Jonas Fletcher, still grieving his wife's passing, thought it was just a stray cat rustling in the hay. But when he slid the barn door aside, he saw her, a woman with haunted eyes, clutching two shivering twins. She was the mail-order bride he'd written to. Yet the circumstances of her arrival were nothing like he'd imagined. A surge of protective instinct and something deeper filled his chest. It was near midnight, and by dawn he'd be compelled to make the most daring decision of his life. Jonas Fletcher had lived in the rolling scrublands of northern Arizona for over a decade. His ranch, 800 acres of dusty plains, tumbleweeds, and a modest corral, stood proud against a backdrop of harsh, sun-baked mountains. Folks passing through the little town of Willow Bend always remarked on how stoic Jonas appeared. He was a solid presence on any porch or in any saloon, tall, sandy-haired with eyes the color of twilight. Some said it was a shame that such a good man had lost his beloved wife Clara to pneumonia 2 years prior. Others whispered that he might never recover from the heartbreak. But time had its way of eroding grief, or at least layering it with the tasks of daily living. The ranch work demanded his early mornings and late evenings feeding the horses, mending fences, hauling water, shoveling manure. If he didn't throw himself into the toil, he feared the silence of his empty house would crush him. Yet there was a gnawing loneliness he couldn't ignore. Clara had left a void, and every so often his eyes fell on the rocking chair on the porch she once occupied. People, neighbors, and ranch hands kept dropping hints about looking for companionship again. "You're a young man still," they would say, or Clara would want you to be happy. An acquaintance in Cheyenne named James R. Webb suggested a mail-order bride. James had a cousin who found happiness that way, or so the story went. Jonas mulled it over for months, torn between guilt and longing. Eventually, he wrote a single letter to a matrimony agency recommended by his friend. The letter was brief, describing his ranch and the quiet life he led. He wrote of his desire for someone to share the burdens and the joys of life in the West. Then he posted it and tried his best not to dwell on the matter. Months rolled by without a response. Jonas assumed the letter had been lost, or that no woman in her right mind wanted to come all this way for a rancher still mired in grief. On the night that everything changed, a cold wind whipped through the dusty plains. Jonas had just returned from repairing the chicken coop and was about to retire. But something, an animal's cry, or just a strange intuition, drew him out again. Pulling on a coat, he grabbed his lantern and stepped into the inky darkness, never suspecting how his life was about to shift in one tumultuous night. The barn smelled of damp hay and old leather. Jonas's lantern cast a small ring of light, revealing his mare Daisy shifting anxiously in her stall. At first he spotted movement, perhaps a coyote or a wild dog. Slowly, carefully he approached. That's when he saw them. A slender, trembling woman, her hair in disarray. And beside her, 2 pale-faced little ones, a boy and a girl, clinging to her skirts. She rose abruptly, her posture defensive. "Please don't hurt us," she managed, voice quivering. Jonas lifted the lantern, his free hand going up in a calming gesture. "Ma'am, no one's gonna hurt you." "But who are you?" Her face was smudged with dirt, and there was desperation in her eyes. I'm Maribel Parker," she said. "I came from Missouri. I'm supposed to be your bride." Jonas felt a lurch in his chest. He'd heard of mail-order brides showing up out of the blue, but usually there was some notice, a telegram or something. "Pardon me if I don't understand," he said slowly, "but I only wrote one letter. That was months ago. I never heard back." Maribel managed a shaky nod. "I wrote several times, but there was confusion with the agency. Then I got one letter from you, just your name and address. I had nowhere else to go. My children and we took the stage as far as we could, but the stagecoach was robbed on the way to Willow Bend, and everything I had left was taken. We walked for miles." Jonas's heart twisted at her words. Stagecoach robberies were not uncommon in these parts. He cursed under his breath. "You're saying you came all this way just to find me?" Tears welled in her eyes, but she clenched her jaw. "I know it sounds desperate, but I had no choice. My first husband, passed away years ago. Then There's been trouble since. We just needed a fresh start. I was assured you were a good man." Jonas gazed down at the twins, each no more than 5 years old. They were shivering, exhausted. Something inside him softened. He'd wanted a new start too, but never expected it like this. "All right," he murmured gently. "Let's get you and your children inside. You can't spend another moment in this cold." The house was modest, but sturdy, warmed by a small fire. Jonas kept going in the hearth. He guided Maribel and her twins into the living area. The twins, Sadie and Simon, peered around nervously. Jonas offered them blankets, then heated some water on the stove to make them all tea. As the water boiled, he asked quietly, "You said you were robbed on the stage. Did you report it to the sheriff?" Maribel exhaled a weary breath. "We tried. Sheriff Hudson in Willow Bend said he'd do his best, but there were no leads. We didn't have enough money for a hotel. The clerk at the post office told us how to get to your ranch, so we started walking." Jonas's fists clenched unconsciously. The thought of a woman and 2 children wandering in the cold after a robbery ignited both anger and protectiveness. He poured tea into 3 chipped mugs and handed them around. In the fire's glow, Jonas finally had a better look at Maribel. She was perhaps a year or 2 younger than he was, with soft brown hair and delicate features that bore the strain of hardship. She wore a simple grey dress torn at the hem from travelling. The twins, a boy and a girl, had clearly inherited their mother's gentle features, though their cheeks were smudged with dust and exhaustion. "What about your family back east?" Jonas asked gently. "Is there no one to help?" A shadow crossed Maribel's face. "No," she said. "No one who would. We've been alone for a long time." Her words resonated with Jonas's own loneliness. Memories of Clara flickered in his mind, along with the guilt of seeking another woman's presence at all. Yet here Maribel was, flesh and blood, with nowhere else to go. They spoke for hours, and little by little her story tumbled forth. She had married young, been widowed when an outbreak of influenza swept her town. She tried to make ends meet by working as a seamstress, but pay was scarce. Eventually, a friend suggested the mail-order bride route, convinced that stablemen out west were better providers than any drifting gambler in Missouri. Maribel's letters had apparently gone astray for a time, but she received Jonas's name and address from the agency. She pinned her hopes on him on Willow Bend, on a place far from her past. Jonas, with empathy radiating from his eyes, listened. He wondered if he could truly be the answer to her prayers. After all, he was still healing, yet it didn't escape him that fate or providence might be at work here. "Ma'am," he said finally, voice thick with emotion, "I don't know how this is supposed to go, but there's a spare room for you and your children. You're safe here." She looked at him. tears brimming once more, but this time in relief. "Thank you," she whispered. Jonas was about to guide Maribel and the twins to the spare room, a simple space with a single bed, some spare quilts, and a small dresser when a loud rap sounded on the front door. He froze. It was well past midnight. Who would be calling at this hour? Exchanging a glance with Maribel, he set down his mug. "Stay here," he murmured, picking up the rifle he kept near the fireplace. He opened the door a crack to see a man on the porch, panting eyes wild. Jonas recognized him as Cole Denver, a local rancher who sometimes passed by. "Jonas, you gotta help." Cole gasped. "We found a man shot on the outskirts of town. Doc Mulligan's away in Abilene. I don't know how to help him, and he's losing so much blood." Jonas's mind whirled. "Stay calm. Who's the injured man?" Cole looked over his shoulder. "Says his name is Hal Jenkins. He was with the stagecoach that got robbed. You gotta come." "I don't know what else to do." Maribel had inched closer to the door, her children huddling behind her. She heard the conversation, and Jonas saw the alarm on her face. "That's the same coach we took," she whispered. "He must have been the driver or a guard." Jonas made a quick decision. "Cole, bring him inside." Within minutes, Cole and Jonas were hauling an unconscious Hal Jenkins into Jonas's living room, laying him carefully on a ragged rug by the fire. Maribel gasped at the sight of his bloodied shirt, where a bullet had grazed his side. Jonas rummaged for bandages, clean water, and whiskey. Though he had limited medical skills, Jonas had tended enough injured ranch hands to manage a bullet wound. Maribel, pushing aside her children's frightened eyes, knelt beside him to help. She pressed a clean cloth against Hal's wound, as Jonas gently probed for the bullet, grimacing at the pained groan that escaped the injured man's lips. Cole hovered near the door, wide-eyed. "I'll fetch the sheriff," he said, voice shaky. "Maybe we can catch the folks who did this." Jonas nodded. "Tell him what happened. And hurry." While Cole galloped off into the night, Jonas and Maribel worked tirelessly on Hal Jenkins, cleaning and dressing his wound. Maribel's hands were steady, her expression grim. Sadie and Simon stood off to the side, not making a sound. After what felt like hours, the bleeding slowed. Hal Jenkins drifted in and out of consciousness, murmuring about bandits who took the money and left him for dead. What kind of men would do this? Maribel whispered, tears shining in her eyes. She thought of her own peril on the stage, how easily her children could have been harmed. Jonas exhaled. "Desperate men," he muttered, "with no honor." It was close to 3 a.m. by the time Hal Jenkins was stable enough to be left alone. Jonas slumped in a chair, exhaustion etching lines across his features. Maribel cradled the twins on the couch, their breathing slow and steady as they finally slept. A gentle crackle of the fire filled the silence. Jonas, gazing at Maribel, realized their entire arrangement. Her arrival, the chaos in the barn, the wedding that was supposed to happen once they met properly, had been overshadowed by violence and mayhem. Maribel's voice was soft. If you don't want me and the children to stay, I understand. This has been one trial after another, and you never agreed to anything like this." Jonas surprised himself by reaching out and taking her hand. "Ma'am, I invited you in because I want you here." He swallowed, feeling the weight of the moment. "You're welcome on my ranch for as long as you need. We'll figure out the rest come morning." Her fingers trembled in his grasp. "You don't even know me." He squeezed her hand gently, his eyes flicking over to the twins. They slept innocently, curled up like kittens. I know enough. You're a mother who needs a safe place for her children. You're a woman who braved the West because you believed in a better life. That says plenty. Tears again, but this time they were tears of relief. Maribel wiped them away quickly as though embarrassed. "Thank you," she whispered. "Truly." They said nothing more. Jonas showed her the spare room, and she carried the twins inside. For a long moment, he lingered in the hallway, listening to the shuffle of her feet on the wooden floor. He couldn't deny the stirring inside him, part compassion, part intrigue. Whatever the future held, it seemed fate had brought them together under extraordinary circumstances. Jonas managed just an hour of sleep before the morning light leaked through the windows, painting the wooden floors in pale gold. Even from his bedroom, he could hear Hal Jenkins moaning in the next room. The poor man needed professional medical care, but Doc Mulligan was out of town, and the next best option was a midwife in Willow Bend. Jonas resolved to ride out for help as soon as possible. But first he went to check on Maribel and the twins. The door to the spare room was slightly ajar, and Jonas glimpsed Maribel kneeling by her children, brushing hair from their faces as they slowly woke. They were safe for now. As he turned, he saw the reflection of movement by the front door. Sheriff Hudson had arrived. The sheriff was a no-nonsense older man. Mustache thick, wearing a dusty brown coat, he carried an air of authority that made townspeople step aside. Jonas stepped onto the porch, nodding in greeting. Sheriff Jonas said, "Cole told me you'd come." Hudson dipped his hat. "Morning, Fletcher. Heard about the stagecoach robbery. We got a line on a few fellas who've been terrorizing travelers on the route between Willow Bend and Yuma. I want to speak with Hal Jenkins if he's awake." Jonas frowned. "He's in rough shape, but I'll see if he can talk." The sheriff's gaze swept over the porch. "He's the last witness to that robbery. If we don't get the men soon, they might skip the county. And one more thing Cole also mentioned, you got a mail-order bride who arrived that same night. She was on that stage." Jonas nodded carefully. "Yes, Maribel Parker. She's with her twins." Why Hudson's expression was pensive. "I need statements from them, too. They might remember details." Jonas did not like the sheriff's tone. "Sheriff, they've been through a lot, especially those kids." Hudson sighed. "I don't doubt it. But the law is the law. We want to catch the outlaws. The sooner we find them, the sooner everyone can rest easy." Jonas relented. "Let me talk to Maribel first. I want to be sure she's up to it." The sheriff nodded, stepping off the porch. "I'll be in town if you need me. Send word when she's ready to talk." As Hudson mounted his horse, he turned back. "Oh, and Jonas, there's talk of an urgent matter in the mayor's office. Something about a traveler claiming to be looking for a woman named Parker. A man with a fancy accent." Jonas felt a chill creep along his spine. "Looking for Maribel Parker." Hudson shrugged. "Says so. Don't know more. But keep your eyes open." With that, the sheriff rode off. Jonas's mind raced. Who could be looking for Maribel? And why? After the sheriff's departure, Jonas returned inside to find Maribel fixing a simple breakfast of biscuits and scrambled eggs. She had roused her children, who were now shyly nibbling at their plates. Jonas noted how quickly Maribel tried to resume a semblance of normalcy, though the lines of worry on her face betrayed her. Hal Jenkins was still asleep, thanks to pure exhaustion and possibly blood loss. Jonas pulled a chair beside the kitchen table. "Maribel, do you know anyone else who might be searching for you? A man, maybe from back east." She froze, spatula mid-air. Slowly she lowered it to the skillet. A man. Did the sheriff say who? Jonas shook his head. Only that someone arrived in Willow Bend last night or early this morning asking for a woman named Parker. Maribel closed her eyes, her expression one of dread. It might be an associate of my late husband's. Or someone else I had troubles with. I'd hoped my past wouldn't follow me out here. Jonas gently placed a hand on her arm. Whoever it is, you're safe here. But the sheriff wants a statement from you about the robbery. He's determined to track down these outlaws. Tears gathered at the corners of her eyes, but she blinked them away, nodding. I'll do it. But Jonas, I'm afraid if this other man finds me, he might try to take me or the twins away. Jonas's gut tightened. He has no right if he's not family. I won't let him touch you. He meant it. After all the tragedy, Jonas realized he cared more than he'd anticipated. There was an unmistakable drive to protect Maribel, to shield her twins from whatever darkness they'd left behind. Maribel took a steadying breath, turning off the stove. Thank you. She turned to Sadie and Simon. Children, stay inside. I need to go with Mr. Fletcher for a little while. Sadie asked quietly. Mama, are we in trouble? Maribel's face softened. No, sweet pea. Everything's gonna be fine. But Jonas saw a flicker of uncertainty behind her reassuring words. With Hal Jenkins dozing fitfully in Jonas's spare bed, Jonas left a jug of water and a note that he'd return soon. He and Maribel secured the twins in the house, letting them play with a battered set of wooden blocks left over from Jonas's nephew's visit years ago. Then Jonas saddled up his horse, a sturdy bay gelding named Ranger, while Maribel walked beside him. The town of Willow Bend was barely more than a dusty main street, lined with a few shops, a saloon, a blacksmith, and the sheriff's office. At the far end stood the mayor's building, a single-story clapboard structure that also housed the judge's chambers on occasion. They arrived to find a small gathering of townsfolk, chatting in hushed tones outside. Word of the stagecoach robbery and Hal Jenkins' injuries had spread fast. Jonas had sent a message to the local midwife, Catherine Farnsworth, who promised to head out to Jonas's ranch to check on Hal. Inside the sheriff's office, Maribel gave her statement voice, trembling at times. She recounted the harrowing robbery, how masked men boarded the stage, demanded valuables, and threatened the passengers at gunpoint. She described the ringleader as tall, with a scar on his left cheek. The sheriff took notes, tapping his pencil on the desk. When she finished, Jonas placed a reassuring hand on her shoulder. Sheriff Hudson looked up. That's enough for now. We'll set a posse out. Thank you, Mrs. Parker. He paused. Well, or Ms. Parker. Maribel glanced away, cheeks flushing. Jonas cleared his throat. Maribel is here to be my bride. If the judge is in town, we might as well see about a license. Hudson cocked an eyebrow. You want to wed tonight? Maribel spoke quietly. It's unconventional, I know, but we wanted to do it right. Everything's just happened so fast. Hudson let out a low whistle. Judge Watkins is next door at the mayor's office, but rumor is he's headed out of town by dawn. You'd best speak with him now if you want to make it official. Jonas exchanged a look with Maribel. In the swirl of events, they had barely had time to talk about marriage properly, beyond the initial arrangement that had led her out west. Yet given the looming presence of this mysterious man searching for her, and the potential legal complications, Jonas believed that marrying might offer her the security she desperately needed. Maribel nodded her eyes, reflecting both relief and apprehension. All right. They stepped out into the dusty street, heading to the mayor's office. Inside, Judge Horace Watkins, A tall, bespectacled man with a tired gaze was packing up ledgers and papers. He looked up with mild surprise when Jonas and Maribel approached. "Morning, Fletcher." Mr. Judge greeted, pushing up his spectacles. "What can I do for you?" Jonas cleared his throat, a flutter of nerves he hadn't felt in years, unsettling his stomach. We need a marriage license. And we'd like you to perform the ceremony." A hint of amusement twitched at the corners of Judge Watkins's mouth. "You realize I leave on the stage at first light. After that, I won't be back for weeks." Jonas squared his shoulders. "Yes, sir. We'd like to marry before dawn." Judge Watkins paused, scanning their faces. "Very well. I can draw up the license. Will you be wanting witnesses?" Maribel and Jonas exchanged a glance. She spoke quietly. "The sheriff can sign. Maybe the mayor if he's willing." The judge nodded already, reaching for a pen. "All right, let's get the paperwork sorted." While Judge Watkins scribbled on the license, the door to the mayor's office swung open. A tall, well-dressed man stepped inside, removing a polished bowler hat as he scanned the room. His suit was finer than anything Jonas typically saw, in willow bend, dark grey, with silk lapels. His angular features and thin moustache gave him an air of calculated elegance. Behind him trailed the mayor, a short, harried man, who wrung his hands nervously. "Judge, this is Mr. Percival Green from St. Louis. He says he's here on urgent business." Mr. Green's cold eyes landed on Maribel. At last he murmured, "Maribel Parker." Fear flashed across Maribel's face. She backed up a step involuntarily closer to Jonas. Judge Watkins glanced between them, pen suspended. Jonas squared his shoulders, adopting a protective stance. "Who are you?" Green gave a thin smile. "Percival Green, attorney, representing the interests of one Bartholomew Chambers." "Maribel, you know that name well, don't you?" Maribel's breath hitched. Jonas felt the tension in the air. "What do you want with her?" Jonas demanded. Green smoothed his lapel. "I've come to collect a debt. Mrs. Parker borrowed a considerable sum from Mr. Chambers with certain promises about repayment. I'm here to ensure those obligations are met." Maribel shook her head, voice trembling. "I told him I'd pay back every cent when I was able. That's why I left to find a new life. I wrote him letters, asked for more time. We had an agreement." Green smiled without warmth. "Mr. Chambers has waited long enough. The time for delay is over. Unless you have the means to settle this debt immediately, you must come with me to negotiate. And that includes your children." Jonas felt a wave of anger wash over him. "You have no right to threaten her children," he growled. "She's a free woman out here." Green's eyes narrowed. "The law is the law, Mr. Fletcher. A signed contract in Missouri states that Mrs. Parker agreed to repay a specific sum, plus interest by a certain date. She did not. That debt remains outstanding. I'm authorized to bring her and her dependents back to Missouri to face legal proceedings if she doesn't pay." Maribel trembled, tears threatening. Judge Watkins, still holding the marriage license, cleared his throat. "Mr. Green, you are aware that once a woman is married, her husband may handle such financial disputes if Mrs. Parker is wed to Mr. Fletcher that changes the nature of these claims." Green's thin smile vanished. "I suspect that's precisely why they're rushing to be married." Jonas glared. "We don't owe you an explanation. Judge, do we have to abide by this man's demands?" Watkins shrugged, looking weary. If she's married, Mr. Green can't force her to return to Missouri without due legal process. The territory might consider the debt a civil matter, but not a criminal one, unless there's evidence of fraud. Mr. Green would need to petition a local court, and that could take months. Green's expression hardened. You're only delaying the inevitable. The debt stands. There is no running from it. Maribel's eyes brimmed with tears. I never meant to run. I couldn't live like that anymore, working night and day to pay off a sum I never should have owed in the first place. Jonas stepped closer to her, feeling an overwhelming desire to shield her. Judge, is there anything preventing us from completing the marriage license right now? The judge glanced between Maribel Jonas and Mr. Green. Legally, no. In the territory, you're free to marry as you wish. I'll proceed. Green exhaled sharply. You can do what you like, but I'll be in Willow Bend for a time. Bartholomew Chambers doesn't let debts slip away so easily. Jonas's jaw clenched. Then you can stay as long as you want. Just don't try to harass Miss Parker or those kids again. Green's eyes flicked to Maribel one last time, a sinister promise in his gaze. Then he turned on his heel and left. Judge Watkins resumed writing, but his hand trembled slightly. If you both still want to marry, I'll file this license. I suggest you go through the ceremony promptly. I leave at first light. But be warned, Mr. Green has legal grounds to press that debt. If you can't settle, you'll have a long battle ahead. Jonas heard Maribel's soft sniffle. Gently, he took her hand. We'll face that battle together, if that's what it takes. She blinked at him, gratitude shining through her tears. Jonas? He squeezed her hand, turning to the judge. Let's do it. Just then the mayor, an older man named Henry Wilkins, stepped inside with the sheriff. They'd clearly overheard some of the exchange. The sheriff removed his hat, clearing his throat. We can serve as witnesses if you like. Maribel nodded, her voice wavering. Yes, thank you. And so in the quiet hush of the mayor's office, with the dusty light of afternoon streaming through the window and the threat of Percival Green hovering in the back of their minds, Jonas Fletcher and Maribel Parker stood side by side. Judge Watkins spoke the simple words that bound them in matrimony, asking each if they took the other in sickness and in health for as long as they both should live. Tears glistened on Maribel's cheeks as she uttered, I do. Jonas felt his heart pounding like a stallion's hooves. He hadn't thought he would find himself in this situation again, saying vows, committing his life to someone new. But with each word, a calm certainty filled him. I do, he answered firmly. The sheriff and Mayor Wilkins signed as witnesses. When Watkins finally penned his signature on the license and stamped it with the territorial seal, he turned to Jonas with a thin smile. Congratulations, Mr. and Mrs. Fletcher. The moment was solemn, but overshadowed by the swirl of events. Maribel wiped her tears, half from relief, half from the heaviness of the situation. Jonas carefully slipped his arm around her waist, offering the only comfort he could. When they stepped out onto the street, they realized the day had passed swiftly. The sun hung low in the sky, painting the dusty town in gold and orange. Dawn was still hours away, but as far as the law was concerned, Jonas and Maribel were husband and wife now. They returned to Jonas's ranch, finding the twins still playing quietly with the wooden blocks. Sadie looked up and spotted Jonas with his arm protectively around her mother. She tilted her head curiously. Simon stood up, blinking. Maribel sank to her knees, beckoning the children. Come here, my loves. Jonas joined them, taking a seat on the floor. He could see the question in their eyes. What had changed? Why did their mother seem different? Maribel smoothed Sadie's hair, tears sparkling. You remember Mr. Fletcher? The twins nodded, eyes glued to him. Maribel continued softly. He's our family. He's your new pa. Jonas felt his throat tighten as the words hit him. He hardly knew these two children, and yet he felt a deep tenderness toward them. Simon blinked, shifting closer to his mother. Will we live here? Then? Jonas forced a gentle smile, his voice a soft rumble. That's right. This ranch is your home now. Sadie looked at Maribel with wide eyes. Does that mean we won't be hungry anymore? The question squeezed Jonas's heart. He realized that these children had lived in precarious circumstances, traveling uncertain of where their next meal might come from. He placed a firm hand on Sadie's shoulder. You'll never be hungry here, sweetheart. I promise. The twins exchanged a glance. Children, with their extraordinary resilience, seemed to accept this new arrangement more quickly than many adults would. Sadie crawled into Jonas's lap, shyly leaning against him, while Simon nestled beside his mother. Maribel brushed tears aside, looking at Jonas with a wordless, profound gratitude. Thank you, she whispered, her voice trembling with emotion that said far more than the simple words. Darkness settled once more, the household lamps illuminating the ranch's rooms in warm, flickering light. Hal Jenkins was stable thanks to midwife Catherine Farnsworth's expert care. He had recounted more details. He recognized the man with the scar who led the robbery, a known outlaw named Levi Cobb. The sheriff was forming a posse to hunt them down, but it might take days or weeks. Maribel tried to rest in Jonas's bedroom, but she couldn't sleep. Instead, she wandered into the living room, where Jonas sat by the fire, gazing at the flames. He turned, noticing her presence. Can't sleep? He asked softly. She shook her head. No. Too much on my mind. Jonas nodded. Me too. She approached slowly, settling on the edge of the hearth. The firelight danced over her features. Jonas, I need you to know something about the debt. Bartholomew Chambers tricked me after my first husband died. He offered help, said he'd keep the creditors away, but every month he demanded more money. I never signed anything but an informal agreement, or so I thought. He must have forged documents or convinced me to sign something I didn't understand. I couldn't afford a lawyer to fight him. Jonas absorbed her words, anger simmering at the injustice she'd suffered. We'll deal with that. If Chambers's man tries anything here, I'll stand by you. She smiled shakily. You barely know me, yet you've risked so much. Jonas exhaled, leaning forward, elbows on his knees. I know what it is to lose someone. Maribel. When Clara died, part of me died too. I shut out the world. But you and your children arrived like a storm, and you reminded me that life can surprise you. She bit her lip, tears gathering again. I'll do my best to be a good wife and a mother to your children, our children. Jonas placed his hand over hers. We'll figure it out. Together. Outside, the night wind whistled across the plains, rattling the shutters. Unspoken, they both felt it, a sense of fragile peace amid a storm of troubles. But at least they were facing it, side by side. The hours passed in restless sleep. Jonas dreamed of footsteps in the yard, the neigh of nervous horses' men, whispering in the dark. When he woke just before dawn, a dull ache of anxiety settled in his stomach. He checked on Maribel. She had drifted off beside the twins. He felt an odd mixture of tenderness and guilt for the life he was thrusting her into, a dusty ranch, looming threats of outlaws, a manipulative creditor from back east. He whispered a promise to her sleeping form. "I'll protect you. I swear." Then he stepped into the yard to check the corral, the barn, the perimeter. Morning light bled into the sky, painting it pink and violet. The wind was cold, biting through his shirt. A rustling near the fence caught his attention. Jonas froze, heart pounding. Slowly he crept toward the sound hand, going to the revolver on his hip. A man's shape emerged from the half-light. Jonas recognized him instantly. Percival Green, the lawyer from St. Louis. He stood with an air of arrogance, hands clasped behind his back, as though he were strolling a gentleman's garden. "What are you doing on my property?" Jonas growled, revolver half drawn. Green lifted his chin. "Easy, Mr. Fletcher. I merely came to deliver a message. Mr. Chambers is aware that you and Maribel Parker excuse me. Mrs. Fletcher are now wed. He extends his congratulations and also his demand for payment in full." Jonas's temper flared. "You have a funny way of offering congratulations. Show yourself off this land before I help you find your way." Green's mouth curved into a smirk. Temper. Let me remind you that if she or you do not settle this debt within 30 days, Mr. Chambers will obtain a court order to seize your assets or force you both back to Missouri. That includes this ranch, your livestock, and anything else of value." The threat landed like a punch to Jonas's gut. He had enough finances to keep his ranch running, but not to pay off some unknown debt that could be massive. "You can't take my ranch," he spat. Green shrugged delicately. "We'll see what the territorial judge says. 30 days, Mr. Fletcher. Good morning to you." With that, the man turned on his heel, leaving Jonas shaking with anger. The sun was just cresting the horizon, and Jonas's new life with Maribel was already under siege. Jonas marched back to the house, slamming the door behind him. The noise startled Maribel and the twins. She sat up, eyes wide with alarm. "Jonas. What's happened?" His face was flushed as he struggled to compose himself. Green was outside. "He says we have 30 days to pay Chambers or face losing the ranch." Maribel's cheeks paled. "I don't know what to do. I never knew the debt would go that high. Chambers had ways of doubling interest." "Jonas, I'm so sorry." Jonas paced. "Don't apologize. This is on that snake, Chambers. But we need a plan, fast." He stopped, turning to her. "Maribel, do you have any relatives who might help? Any inheritance?" She shook her head miserably. "No, nothing. I only have a few personal belongings in Missouri, not worth much. Chambers took nearly everything else." Jonas rubbed his forehead. "I have some savings, but not enough for a massive debt. Maybe I could sell a portion of the cattle or some acreage, but prices are low, and it might not raise enough. We're in the thick of a drought. Buyers aren't paying fair prices." Maribel swallowed hard, glancing at her children who were watching fearfully. "We'll do whatever it takes," she said, voice trembling but determined. Before Jonas could reply, they heard a weak call from the spare room. Hal Jenkins was awake, calling for water. Maribel went to tend to him while Jonas tried to calm himself, inhaling and exhaling. When she returned, Jonas laid a hand on her shoulder. "It's time I ride into Willow Bend, see if the bank will work with me, or if there's another way to raise funds. Will you be okay here? Maybe Cole or one of my ranch hands can keep watch in case Green tries something." She nodded bravely. "Go, I'll be fine." Jonas gave a curt nod, then quickly saddled Ranger and rode off with determined vigor. The morning sun climbed higher, and though his mind churned with fear, he clung to one truth: he wouldn't lose the ranch. Not after all he'd built, and not when Maribel and the twins needed it to survive. The Willow Bend Bank was a small, unimpressive building with a faded sign. Inside it was quiet, save for a single teller behind a caged window and a short, balding man with spectacles hunched over a ledger. Jonas recognized him as Albert Thompson, the bank manager. Thompson looked up, blinking at Jonas. "Morning, Fletcher. What brings you here so early?" Jonas scratched the back of his neck. "I need a loan, and quick. A large sum, though I'm not sure how much yet." Thompson's bushy brows rose. How large? Jonas hesitated, explaining briefly about Chambers's man coming after Maribel for a debt. The manager's face soured. "I've heard of Bartholomew Chambers. He's known for unscrupulous lending practices. But if the note is legitimate, you might be in trouble." Jonas nodded grimly. "If I can secure a loan from the bank, I could pay Chambers off and then repay the bank at a reasonable interest. But I need to move fast." Thompson sighed, removing his spectacles and rubbing his eyes. "Jonas, you're a good man. But your ranch? The region's experiencing a drought. Cattle prices are down. My superiors in Yuma might not approve a big loan, especially if you only just married and took on additional responsibilities." Jonas's fists clenched in frustration. "So you're saying you won't help Thompson?" Held up a hand. "Not exactly. I'm saying it's tricky. But I might be able to do something if you put up the ranch as collateral, and if you can find a co-signer with enough assets." A sinking feeling took hold in Jonas's stomach. Who would co-sign? The manager shrugged apologetically. Maybe a wealthier rancher. Or the mayor, if he were so inclined. But you'd have to convince them you can repay. Otherwise, they won't want to risk their money. Jonas swallowed. He knew no one with that kind of clout, except maybe a big rancher named Beauregard Whitley, who owned half the territory's prime grazing land. But Whitley was known to be a shrewd, often ruthless man. With no other choice, Jonas thanked Thompson and left. Outside, the sun was scorching by mid-morning. Jonas stared at the bright sky, praying for direction. He thought of his old friend James R. Webb, who had first suggested the mail-order bride. James had some contacts, but was there time to reach him? A telegram might take days. As Jonas mounted, Ranger lost in thought, a soft voice startled him. "Mr. Fletcher." He turned to see a woman in a dark shawl stepping from around the corner. She approached with a gentle smile. "I overheard part of your conversation inside. My name is Rosalind Baxter. I used to work for Bartholomew Chambers." Jonas dismounted, eyeing her warily. "Chambers's employee." "Then I don't know if I can trust you," she sighed sadly. "I left his service when I saw how he exploited widows and families. I can't undo the harm he's done, but I might be able to help you." Jonas studied her face, searching for deceit. How Rosalind leaned in, voice low. "Chambers might not expect you to pay him back if you prove his debt contract was fraudulent. I have documents showing he forged signatures and manipulated interest rates. If you can get these in front of a reputable judge, you might have a case to cancel the debt." Hope sparked in Jonas's chest. "You have proof," she nodded. "Yes. But it's not safe for me to carry them. Chambers would do anything to keep these hidden. I came to Willow Bend under an alias. If you can get me to a judge you trust someone not in Chambers' pocket, I can testify." Jonas thought of Judge Watkins, who had already left on the stage, or might be leaving soon. He turned to Rosalind. "Judge Watkins just left town for the circuit. We can ride after him, maybe catch him in the next settlement if we hurry. But it's a half-day's ride." Rosalind pressed her lips together. "If that's what it takes, I'll do it." Jonas mounted Ranger again, looking down at her. "Wait here. I need to gather supplies and my wife. She deserves to know about this." Rosalind nodded, her eyes solemn. "I'll be by the livery stable." Jonas sped back to the ranch with urgency. Maribel greeted him on the porch, her features taut with worry. "Any luck?" He explained what happened at the bank, then told her about Rosalind Baxter and the promise of documents proving Chambers's wrongdoing. Maribel's face flickered with hope, then caution. "She's risking a lot to help us," Maribel murmured. Jonas nodded. "I believe her. But we need to catch Judge Watkins before he's out of reach. It might be our only chance for a fair hearing." Maribel squared her shoulders. "Then let's go." They decided Jonas and Maribel would ride out immediately. Hal Jenkins was stable enough, and the twins would be left in the care of 2 ranch hands, a kindly older couple named Bert and Helen. Maribel knelt, hugging her children tight. "We'll be back soon," she promised, trying to sound confident. Sadie clung to her mother. "Don't go." Maribel kissed her forehead gently. "I have to, sweetheart. So we can keep the ranch and stay together forever." Simon sniffled, burying his face in her skirt. Jonas bent down, ruffling the boy's hair. "I promise I'll bring your ma back safe." With that, Jonas helped Maribel onto Daisy, his old mare. He mounted Ranger. They galloped toward Willow Bend, the dust kicking up beneath the horses' hooves. When they reached the livery stable, Rosalind was waiting perched atop a borrowed horse. She nodded in greeting eyes, darting nervously, as if she expected Chambers's men to appear. Without delay, the trio set off along the winding trail that snaked westward, aiming to intercept the stage, or catch Judge Watkins at the next settlement. The day wore on, the sun scorching overhead. They paused only to water the horses and allow them a short rest. Rosalind clutched a small satchel, presumably holding the damning evidence against Chambers. Maribel rode behind Jonas, the tension in her posture matching the roiling turmoil in his own chest. Late in the afternoon, they spotted the stagecoach tracks. Jonas guided them onto a side trail, hoping to cut across a bend in the road and intercept the stage. They were making good time when a bullet whizzed past, kicking up dust in front of Daisy's hooves. "Ambush!" Jonas yelled, hauling the reins. 4 men emerged from behind rocks, guns raised. One wore a red bandana over his face. Another had a scar on his left cheek, exactly as Hal Jenkins had described. Levi Cobb and his gang. "Throw down your weapons," snarled Cobb. "And whatever else you're carrying." Jonas exchanged a glance with Maribel and Rosalind. His hand hovered by his revolver, but they were outnumbered. Rosalind's face went white. She gripped the satchel tighter. Cobb's eyes gleamed. "We heard you was traveling with something valuable. Might as well hand it over." Jonas cursed under his breath. Someone must have tipped them off about Rosalind's documents, or they simply saw them as easy prey. Jonas slowly reached for his revolver, trying to mask the movement. But the bandit next to Cobb leveled a rifle at him. Maribel, trembling, tried to shield Rosalind and the satchel. "You won't find anything of worth," she said, voice quivering. Cobb let out a harsh laugh. "We'll see about that." He took a step forward, aiming at Jonas's chest. "Drop the gun, Rancher, or I'll fill you with lead." Jonas gritted his teeth, heart hammering. "Maribel, stay behind me." She complied, though her eyes blazed with protective fire. Cobb sneered, stepping closer. "Let's do this the easy way." Suddenly, a shot rang out from behind. One of Cobb's men spun, collapsing with a cry. Cobb whirled, cursing. Jonas seized the moment, firing at another outlaw. The man yelped and dived for cover. More gunfire exploded. Jonas saw the sheriff and 3 deputies barreling in from the opposite side of the trail. The posse had found them. Cobb fired wildly, but Jonas returned fire. The bandit with the rifle lurched, clutching his shoulder. Cobb, realizing they were outgunned, vaulted onto a horse and spurred it hard. One of his men followed the others were either shot or pinned down. The sheriff rode up, rifle in hand. "Jonas. You all right?" Jonas exhaled shakily, lowering his gun. Maribel and Rosalind were unharmed, though visibly shaken. "I'm fine," Jonas managed, scanning the carnage. 2 outlaws lay wounded, groaning. The sheriff's men disarmed them. "What are you doing out here, Sheriff?" Sheriff Hudson tipped his hat. "Tracking Levi Cobb. We heard a rumor he was prowling these parts. We were on his trail when we heard the shooting." Jonas slid off, Ranger still amped from adrenaline. "Thanks, Sheriff. You saved our hides." Hudson gave him a level look. "Just doing my job." "Where are you headed in such a hurry?" Jonas hesitated, glancing at Rosalind. She lifted her chin, stepping forward. "Sheriff, I have evidence against Bartholomew Chambers that he's been forging contracts and enslaving widows to insurmountable debts. We need to reach Judge Watkins before he leaves the territory." Hudson frowned. "That's a serious claim." Rosalind handed him a folded set of papers from her satchel. "You can see for yourself. I have names, amounts, and notarized documents that Chambers altered. I was prepared to testify in a Missouri court, but he paid off the local authorities there. I'm hoping out here someone will listen." The sheriff scanned the papers, eyebrows rising. "Well, Miss Baxter, it looks legitimate from what I can tell. If this is real, Chambers might be in big trouble." He looked at Jonas. "You planning to chase down Judge Watkins?" Jonas nodded. "Yes, that's our best shot at justice." Hudson rubbed his chin. "All right. I can escort these wounded bandits back to Willow Bend. My deputies and I will keep an eye out for Cobb. You folks ride on. Good luck." With that, they parted ways. Jonas, Maribel, and Rosalind spurred their horses onward, hearts racing. The future of the ranch and perhaps justice for many exploited souls hung in the balance. They reached the stagecoach just in time. Judge Watkins looked up, startled, as Jonas, Maribel, and Rosalind approached, dusty and urgent. "Judge, this is Rosalind Baxter," Jonas said. "She has proof that Chambers forged debt documents against my wife." Rosalind presented the papers. Watkins read them, frowning. "These are serious allegations," he said. "They warrant a formal hearing." He told them the circuit court would convene in Glendale in a week, and he'd preside. "Bring Green, and I'll hear the case." Jonas nodded. "We'll be there." Watkins agreed to safeguard the documents. As they rode back to Willow Bend, hope stirred. They finally had a path to justice, but time was short, and danger still followed close behind. Back at the ranch, Jonas and Maribel embraced a brief peace. The twins were safe, Rosalind sheltered, and hope stirred. But 2 days later, word came. Percival Green was still in Willow Bend, demanding payment. Jonas confronted him at the edge of town. "You can tell Chambers we'll see him in court," Jonas said coldly. Green's jaw tightened. "You're making a grave mistake." "No," Jonas replied. "You and Chambers did." With Rosalind's evidence secured and Judge Watkins awaiting them in Glendale, The tide had turned. The showdown was no longer a threat. It was a promise. Green stormed away, his threats echoing behind him. But Jonas stood firm. The battle for their future had begun, and this time they wouldn't face it alone. The day of the court hearing arrived. Jonas, Maribel, Rosalind, the twins. Sheriff Hudson and 2 deputies traveled to Glendale by wagon with Hal Jenkins, joining them to testify about the robbery and any dealings linked to Chambers. The town of Glendale buzzed with gossip about the upcoming case. In the courthouse, Judge Watkins took the bench, his presence commanding silence. Percival Green was already inside, flanked by 2 men in fine suits. He sneered when he saw Rosalind. "That woman stole from Mr. Chambers." He barked. "She took the truth," the sheriff snapped. "Save it for court." Inside, the hearing began. Green's lawyer presented contracts and spoke of unpaid debts. Maribel sat tense, clinging to Jonas's hand. Then Rosalind took the stand. Calm and resolute, she exposed Chambers's fraud, how he manipulated widows, forged interest rates, and ruined lives. She handed over signed documents Judge Watkins had already reviewed. Green exploded, calling the papers stolen. The judge overruled. Evidence of a crime cannot be ignored. The sheriff and Hal Jenkins backed Rosalind's claims. Jenkins confirmed he'd overheard Chambers's name linked to the robbery. After a tense recess, Judge Watkins returned with the ruling. The court finds the debt void. It was obtained through fraudulent means. Mrs. Fletcher owes nothing. A warrant for Bartholomew Chambers will be issued if he enters this territory again. Gasps echoed. Green turned crimson with fury. "We'll appeal. You're welcome to try," the judge said flatly. Maribel wept, overcome with joy. Jonas pulled her close, their hands entwined. Rosalind smiled through tears, the weight of her secret finally lifted. Green stormed out with his men, leaving behind the bitter taste of defeat. Jonas stood tall, his wife beside him, their children waiting at home. Justice had finally found its voice in the wilds of the West. Returning to Willow Bend, Jonas and Maribel were welcomed with warm smiles and a small celebration. Bert and Helen had baked a pie, and Hal Jenkins, still recovering, tipped his hat from the porch. Sadie and Simon ran freely in the yard, laughter echoing under the wide sky. Maribel stood beside Jonas, her hand slipping into his. "We did it," he whispered. Her eyes shimmered. "You gave us hope. A home." Jonas smiled, wrapping an arm around her. "We saved each other." The sun dipped below the plains, casting golden light across their land. With hardship behind and love ahead, they faced the future as one family healed whole and finally at peace. Thank you for joining us on this wild and heart-throbbing journey through the scrublands of the Old West. Jonas Fletcher and Maribel Parker's story shows that even in the darkest moments, beset by tragedy, deceit, and near ruin, hope and courage can light the way to a new dawn. Their battle wasn't just against the harsh frontier. It was against the demons of their past, the cruelty of unjust creditors, and the shadows of fear that threatened to destroy them. In the end, they emerged united, forging a family bond far stronger than any hardship. If this tale of perseverance, love, and second chances kept you on the edge of your seat, then be sure to like, share, and subscribe to our channel. We have plenty more dramatic stories and unforgettable characters waiting to sweep you away into the excitement of the Wild West. So saddle up and come along for the next adventure.